Before we start, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends and family. Also, can you please tell me where and what time you're watching? Thanks. The city never slept, but the parts that stayed awake after midnight were the ones you didn't want to see with the lights on. I was used to long hours working security jobs that kept me isolated from the chaos outside. When you're the guy sitting behind the desk, people assume you don't notice much. That's their mistake. I noticed everything. The slumped figures with glazed eyes shuffling past, the scuff of shoes on concrete, the faint stench of ozone mixed with piss that lingered in alleys no one bothered to clean. The parking garage under the Adley building was just another tomb in the city's vast collection. 4 stories of hollow concrete, filled with cars that rarely moved and shadows that never seemed to fall quite right. I wouldn't have taken the shift if Eddie hadn't begged me. He had a family, a wife threatening to leave if he didn't take her to Florida this summer. Me? I didn't have much tying me to anything, so I said yes. Adley's night shifts weren't busy, just eerie. The building sat in the financial district, a corpse of glass and steel that emptied out after 6. By 10, the garage was practically deserted, save for a stray car left by an overworked accountant or janitor pulling a double shift. My job was simple. Sit in the security booth at ground level, watch the monitors, and make sure no one was breaking into cars or using the place as a drug den. Easy money, or so Eddie had claimed. On my first night, I was settling in, getting familiar with the security booth, when I noticed an old battered drawer at the bottom of the desk. It looked like it hadn't been opened in ages. Curiosity got the better of me, and I pulled it open. Inside, I found the usual clutter: paper clips, an old receipt, a couple of crumpled notes. But what really caught my eye was a plastic-coated sheet of paper sitting neatly among the mess. It didn't belong. It wasn't part of the standard security protocols, which were in a pristine black binder sitting right next to it. This sheet was different. The laminate was scratched and worn, like it had passed through too many hands. The writing wasn't printed either. It was handwritten, hurried, almost frantic. These weren't instructions, they were warnings. A desperate man's last attempt to leave something behind for whoever came after. The rules were as follows. 1. Only patrol levels 2 and 4. Avoid level 3 entirely. 2. If you hear tires screeching but see no car, stand completely still for 60 seconds. Do not look around. 3. Do not check your reflection in any car window after 2:30 a.m. 4. If you see headlights that don't belong to a car, turn off your flashlight immediately and walk back to the security office. Do not run. I laughed at first. A list like that had to be a joke. Maybe Eddie left it to mess with me, but the edges of the paper were frayed and the laminate was scratched like it had been handled far too often. There was something else too, a faint smudge of red near the bottom corner. It might have been ketchup, but my gut told me otherwise. By the time I folded the sheet back into the drawer, the cheap clock in the booth read 11:15. I grabbed my flashlight, clipped my radio to my belt, and started my first patrol. Rules or not, I had a job to do. The garage was colder than I expected. Concrete traps the chill, amplifies it until it seeps into your bones. My boots echoed with each step, the sound bouncing back like someone was following just out of sight. Level 2 was empty. I swept my flashlight across the rows of cars, the beam catching glints of metal and glass. Nothing moved except a faint shimmer of dust stirred by the air vents. I wrote "all clear" in my notepad and headed for the stairs to level 4. It was the same there, empty, quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that wasn't just the absence of noise, but something heavier, like the world was holding its breath. Instinctively, I glanced down the ramp leading to level 3. Darkness. The lights weren't dim, they were out entirely. Probably a malfunction. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling. I couldn't shake how it looked, that black yawning void that seemed to devour the edges of everything nearby. Back at the booth, I flipped through the security camera feeds. The grainy monitors showed levels 2 and 4 exactly as I'd left them. Level 3, though, was nothing but static, thick, pulsing static that hissed faintly through the speakers. I turned the volume down, making a mental note to report it to maintenance. It wasn't really my problem. I spent the next hour flipping through the safety binder, trying to ignore the laminated rules. The air grew heavier as midnight approached. That's when I heard it. Faint at first, it sounded like a low, drawn-out squeal, rising and falling as though something heavy was being dragged across metal. I froze, straining to listen, but the sound vanished as quickly as it had come. The garage was empty, I was sure of that. But as I glanced at the monitors, unease crept in. The cars on level 4 didn't look parked quite the same, and the static on level 3 sounded louder now, almost angry. Just as I reached for my radio, it crackled. "Security office, this is Dan from Central. Copy?" I pressed the button. "Copy, what's up?" "We got a report about strange noises in your area. Some guy passing by said he heard screeching tires. Anything on your end?" "Nope," I lied. "All quiet." "All right, keep an ear out and don't head down to level 3. "Why not?" I asked. "Just trust me. Central out." The radio clicked off, but my hand lingered over the switch longer than it needed to. What the hell kind of advice was that? Don't head to level 3? Who were they kidding? Sitting under the flickering fluorescent lights, I could feel my certainty starting to fray. The rules in the drawer weren't a joke, and the dark void of level 3 wasn't just another part of the garage. Something was there. I just couldn't figure out what. My second patrol started much like the first, but this time, the laminated rules weren't just idle curiosities. They hung in my mind like a weight, pressing down with each step. I checked my watch, 12:47 a.m. The air felt colder now, and the flickering lights on level 2 seemed worse. On the far side of the floor, I heard something faint. Movement? My boots scraped the concrete as I turned toward the sound, but there was nothing. Just a line of parked cars, their windows dark. Even so, the feeling of being watched lingered. "Get a grip," I muttered to myself. Just shadows and bad wiring, but even to me the words sounded hollow. I finished my sweep and climbed the stairs to level 4. The climb felt steeper this time, my legs heavier. At the top, my flashlight flickered, dimming for a second before surging back to life. The darkness here seemed thicker somehow, like the shadows weren't just an absence of light, but something solid. I rushed through my patrol, eager to get back to the relative safety of the booth. But on my way down, I made the mistake of glancing toward level 3. The ramp leading there was a tunnel of pitch black, the lights still out. For a moment, I thought I saw something. A faint flicker, like a shadow peeling itself away from the wall. I should have walked away. Instead, I stepped closer. A sound stirred below, soft, irregular, like someone testing each step. It didn't rush or falter, just climbed. My flashlight wavered in my shaking hand, its beam slipping off the wall into the void. My foot slid back slightly, the edge of the floor creaking beneath me, the sound cutting through the silence. Something cold brushed against my thoughts, a rule I'd barely let myself believe. Never cross paths with level 3. The footsteps stopped. The silence that followed was suffocating, thick, and all-consuming. Then it came. A screech, sharp and violent, tearing through the quiet like metal on bone. My flashlight dipped as my grip faltered. The sound wasn't coming from the street. It was trapped here below me, on level 3. Frozen in place, I stood perfectly still, counting the seconds. 1, 2, 10, 20. My muscles ached from the tension, but I didn't move. The screeching stopped as abruptly as it started, leaving a sharp ringing in my ears. When I finally dared to move, I headed back to the booth, each step slow and measured, betraying none of the panic clawing at me from within. Once inside, I locked the door, sank into the chair, and tried to steady my racing heart. The monitors stared back, cold and indifferent. Levels 2 and 4 were empty, just as I'd left them. Level 3's feed was still static, the faint hissing persistent. I considered calling Dan, reporting the noises and footsteps, but what could I say that wouldn't make me sound insane? Instead, I pulled out the laminated rules again, reading them with a growing sense of unease. Who had written these? And more importantly, why? The questions swirled as I stared at the monitors. The static on level 3 seemed to pulse now, the hissing growing louder. I reached for the volume knob, desperate to silence it, but the sound wouldn't fade. Instead, it shifted, low at first, then rising into a whisper. Words began to form, faint and fragmented like a voice trying to claw its way through the interference. Come down. My blood turned to ice. I slammed the volume off and stumbled back, my hands trembling. This wasn't static. This wasn't interference. Something was trying to reach me. The laminated rules sat on the desk, almost taunting me with their absurd specificity. I should have quit right then and there, walked out of the booth, left the garage, and never looked back. But curiosity is a strange thing. It gnaws at you, twists your thoughts, and blurs the line between recklessness and stupidity. By 2:30 a.m., the garage had settled into an oppressive silence. The monitors glowed dully, empty of anything unusual, though I couldn't bring myself to trust them anymore. Leaning back, I rubbed the tension from my temples, and that's when I noticed it. A faint smear of red on the desk. It hadn't been there before. The silence fractured, faint at first, barely a hum. But it swelled, steady and deliberate, unmistakable. My stomach twisted as the sound drew my gaze toward the ramp leading down to level 3. Every instinct screamed at me to stop, to follow the rules, to leave the unknown alone. But something pulled me forward. Fear, defiance, or perhaps the sinking certainty that whatever was down there wouldn't let me leave untouched. The sound cut off abruptly as I reached the edge of the ramp. The stillness that followed was worse. Nothing moved, but the air hung heavy, thick with an unspoken threat that prickled against my skin. Hello? My voice echoed weak and hollow. No response. I turned to leave, but then I heard it again. Footsteps, louder this time, closer. I spun around, my flashlight flickering as it landed on something at the bottom of the ramp. A figure in a black hoodie moved between the rows of parked cars. "Hey!" I called out, my voice cracking. The figure didn't respond, didn't even glance up. It flickered, its outline blurring like a bad signal on a TV. I hesitated, then followed, my footsteps cautious but driven. I caught sight of it again, standing motionless at the center of level 3. The air around it rippled faintly, as though the space it occupied wasn't tethered to reality. My flashlight sputtered, its beam stuttering in and out, and in the fractured light, the figure multiplied. It split into 3, then 4, before merging back into 1. It turned, its face hidden in shadow, but the weight of its gaze hit me like a blow, an unbearable pressure sinking deep into my chest. "What are you?" I whispered, my voice cracking. The figure tilted its head, and then the sound came, a low, scraping whisper that clawed at my ears like nails on glass. "You saw." The words hung in the air, heavy and accusatory. My pulse thundered as I stumbled back, but the figure didn't move. Instead, it raised an arm, pointing toward the far end of the level. My flashlight followed its gesture, landing on a parked car. The windshield was cracked and the driver's side window was smeared with something dark. "Come closer." I shook my head, my legs refusing to move. Move? No way. My legs felt like lead. The figure didn't react, but disembodied headlights flared to life behind me, bathing the ramp in harsh, unnatural light. My shadow stretched long and distorted across the concrete, twisting in ways that didn't match my movements. Panic gripped my throat as I turned to face the lights, but they were gone, a flash of empty darkness where they had been. I stumbled into the booth, clutching the desk as my chest heaved, each breath shallow and ragged. The monitors buzzed with static, their images glitching and breaking apart. Levels 2 and 4 tilted on the screens, their angles warping and stretching in ways that made my head spin. The room seemed to shrink, the air growing dense and suffocating as the flickering chaos seeped into every corner. Then it started, a tapping. Soft at first, like fingernails drumming against the booth window, then louder, sharper, until it became a steady pounding that reverberated through my skull. I turned, and there it was. The figure stood pressed against the glass, its hood fallen back to reveal a face that wasn't a face at all. It was a shifting mass of features, eyes, mouths, and noses flickering and blurring in and out of existence, overlapping in a grotesque, nauseating collage. "You broke the rules," it hissed, its voice a discordant symphony of alien tones. "Now you are mine." Its hand pressed against the glass, the surface warping under its touch as though the barrier between us were paper thin. My fingers found the flashlight, and I clicked it on, aiming the beam directly at the creature. The reaction was instant. The figure shrieked, its form convulsing violently as the light pierced through it. The booth filled with the sound of glass cracking, the windows shuddering as though they might shatter at any second. But the flashlight wasn't enough. The creature's shadow stretched, growing longer, inching closer even as its body writhed in agony. My eyes darted to the monitors, their chaotic images pulsing with frantic intensity. Then, in the corner of one screen, I saw it, a reflection in the window of a car parked on level 3. Its true form shimmered there, fractured and incomplete, raw in a way that felt exposed. My chest tightened, and a reckless idea clawed its way into my mind. I burst from the booth, the air filled with piercing shrieks, each laced with fury, as footsteps thundered behind me, closing the distance. I reached the car, its window streaked with dark, viscous smears that caught the erratic glow of my flashlight. The reflection remained, restless and writhing within the glass. Behind me, the creature surged forward, its form stretching as though to tear through the space between us. My hand moved on instinct, raising the flashlight. The beam struck true, slicing through the shadows with surgical precision. An inhuman wail tore through the air, raw and deafening, as the figure convulsed. Its body jerked violently, then began collapsing inward, drawn into the reflection. Cracks spiderwebbed across the car window, jagged lines radiating outward as the hum of energy rose to an unbearable pitch. Then, with a final, ear-splitting scream, it was over. Silence fell, fragile and heavy, broken only by the faint shimmer of fractured light rippling across the glass. "Thank you." The words stopped me cold, a knot tightening deep in my gut. The voice wasn't coming from the car window, it was inside my head. The sun rose slowly, its light creeping across the city as if reluctant to wake. As soon as my shift ended, I quit. No explanation, no notice. I dropped my badge on the desk and walked out, leaving the laminated rules and everything else behind. The money wasn't worth it. Nothing was worth what I'd been through. As I reached my car at the far end of the lot, I hesitated. The memory of those headlights flickered at the edges of my mind, a shadow I couldn't shake. But the world outside was bright, alive. The weight of the night felt distant, almost like a dream. I drove away without looking back. But deep down, I knew the truth. Things like that don't let go. They linger, waiting for the next moment you let your guard down.